and welcome to a little show I like to call Mrs. Pharaoh's Analysis. Today, we will be exploring the Romantic movement, and specifically Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Now, it's fair to say that discovery propels human experience. Hence, the way in which we explore our imperfections, religion, and imagination propels our experience as human beings. The Romantic movement, which includes this poem, displays the raw emotion that allows people to explore their inner realms. The mariner is able to free himself from the immense amount of sheer guilt he feels for surviving this sort of shipwreck through telling a story to an unfortunate wedding guest. This concept of enlightenment through emotion is present throughout Romantic works of literature. For example, in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Walton gains enlightenment through emotion by hearing the long tale of Victor Frankenstein. After hearing this long tale, Walton eventually realizes that he's not impervious to error, and hence he should not be as stubborn and self-absorbed as Victor Frankenstein. Hence, the Romantic genre often involves a trust in intuitions, emotions, and feelings. Through telling these lengthy emotional journeys, the speaker is able to discover something about himself and hence propel his emotional experience. For example, as the mariner continues to tell his dramatic story, he concurrently embarks upon a journey of self-discovery. Therefore, while this poem at first glance may appear to be simply the story of an old and psychotic seaman telling the tale of his traumatic experience, it subtly suggests that sometimes suffering or inner discovery is necessary to propel human experience. After experiencing numerous near-death experiences while at sea, the mariner came to the realization that rather than being this dominant and ever-present man, he was merely a pawn in the great scheme of the ocean. Therefore, viewing the all-powerful nature of the ocean and how easily life can be taken away, the mariner learns of his own irrelevance in the scheme of the entire universe. Hence, the discovery of humanity's fragility propels his experience as a human being.
Miss Katz. So that makes sense. Now I see how this poem connects to the recurring theme that discovery propels human experience. See, Mrs. Pharaoh? We connected to a recurring theme. But how did you know the poem is romantic?
Oh, good question, Rachel.
It's Emily!
Anyway, as I was saying, good question. This poem is clearly reflective of Romantic poetry due to its dramatic expression of detail, as well as its emotional subject matter. Primarily, this poem is the epitome of Romantic poetry because it's a form of nature-inspired poetry and also depicts a sort of inner search for individualism. It also is clearly romantic in how it portrays nature as some sort of omnipotent force that has the ability to change one's perspective. For example, in this poem, the power of the thrashing sea led the speaker to have a greater admiration for the smaller aspects of life, such as drinking water. Thus, this poem is clearly an example of Romantic poetry. Well, now we've seen an overall analysis of this work of literature and how it connects to the recurring theme, discovery propels human experience. Now let's see how it connects to three famous quotes.
So according to Pablo Neruda, poetry is an act of peace. First off, let's talk a little about Pablo Neruda and his overall impact on poetry throughout history. He wrote a variety of styles, including surrealist poems, historical epics, overtly political manifestos, a prose autobiography, and many, many passionate love poems. Isn't he so dreamy? Neruda firmly believed that peace goes into the making of a poet, as flour goes into the making of bread. By the way, thanks Rachel for that wonderful explanation of how Romantic movements impacted poetry. Now let's take a look at how poetry, especially Romantic poetry, can create a peaceful ambiance for the reader, and we'll see the similarities in Coleridge's and Neruda's style of incorporating peaceful aspects into Romantic poetry, hence propelling the overall theme, or in our case, the reader's experience. So one example of Coleridge's use of personal style in The Rime of the Ancient Mariner that incorporates a peaceful attitude is the line, "The ice near Antarctica makes loud cracking noises that sound like noises in a swoon. That is, like the sounds of a fainting person might hear." The word "like" makes clear that this is a simile and adds a softness to this harsh, vivid imagery. Clearly, Coleridge really likes similes. He compares the mysterious wind that blows on him alone to a spring breeze blowing through a meadow, an interesting comparison that adds a personal touch to the poem. The importance of colors in this poem goes along with the interest in the supernatural and specific patterns of images like the moon and the sun. In the poem Rime of the Ancient Mariner, the young wedding guest angrily demands that the mariner let go of him, and the mariner obeys. But the young man is transfixed by the ancient mariner's glittering eye, and can do nothing but sit on a stone and listen to his strange tale. The young man becomes encaptured by the story, and thus enhances the calming and peaceful effect of the poem. Romantic poetry is very unique compared to other styles of poetry due to its ability to touch all of the human senses and create a unique experience for each reader understanding the overall meaning of the poem. The great water snakes move through the silvery moonlight, glittering, blue, green, and black, and the snakes coiled and swarm and become beautiful in the mariner's eyes. He blessed the beautiful creatures in his heart at that moment, and he found himself able to pray, and the corpse of the albatross fell from his neck, sinking like lead into the sea. All these images create a peaceful state, yet carries a heavy feeling with the use of the words lead and coiled snakes. So the Rime of the Ancient Mariner is written in loose, short, ballad stanzas, usually written either in 4 or 6 lines long, and occasionally as many as 9 lines long too. The meter is also somewhat loose, but odd lines are generally tetrameter, while even lines are generally trimeter. It can be argued that the glosses are simply an amusing irrelevancy designed to make the poem seem archaic, and that the truly important text is the poem itself. In its complicated, often Christian symbolism, and its moral lesson that all creatures, great and small, were created by God, and should be loved from the albatross to the slimy snakes in the rotting ocean, and in its characters.
Allen Ginsberg once said, "Poetry is the one place where people can speak their original human mind. It is the outlet for people to say in public what is known in private." Romanticism is all about emotion and sharing one's emotions and stories with others, which is exactly what the mariner does. When the mariner comes out of his shell to share his story for the first time with a wedding guest, he does so poetically. It is the hope and goal of the mariner to tell his story to the wedding guest that he will learn from his life and mistakes. Poetry is the mariner's outlet to share the wisdom he holds in his glittering eye that entrances the wedding guest to listen. Thus, it is an outlet for the poet Samuel Coleridge to share his wisdom with his readers. People tend to shy away from telling other people their mistakes because they can be embarrassing to share. Sharing a private story to the public, especially those who don't know, is risky because you don't know how they will react. But this ancient mariner feels it's finally the right time to tell his story. Though he does at times cause the wedding guest to fear him and his glittering eye, people often like to share their secrets with other people in order to lift the burden from their shoulders and relieve their guilt. This is what the mariner appears to be doing by telling the wedding guest his story, as at the end of his tale, the mariner says, "Forthwith this frame of mine was wrenched with a woeful agony, which forced me to begin my tale, and then it left me free." So the mariner is admitting to the wedding guest that he felt compelled to tell his story, perhaps by God, and by telling his story, he becomes absolved from his guilt. But is this poem just about the mariner and his guilt, or does it also serve as an outlet for the poet to say in public what is known in private? It is possible, since it is known that Coleridge felt remorseful for his addiction to opium. If Coleridge did use the Rime of the Ancient Mariner as a catharsis for his guilt, it would prove that poetry is the one place where people can speak their original human mind, because Coleridge is using the poem, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, to speak of guilt that is relieved only through confession.
All good poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion, recollected in tranquility. William Wordsworth. Feelings and emotions are fundamental to writing poetry, especially romantic poetry, while a calm mind is also imperative to present the past or previous thoughts and feelings. Similar to Wordsworth, Coleridge plowed forward with writing in this new romantic style that focuses on me rather than the social we. Coleridge's poem employs a framed story that begins with a merry wedding. Despite the crew's initial good fortune and high spirits, the mariner soon experiences the sublimity of nature that leads him to confront feelings of trepidation, horror, and awe. A storm knocks the ship off course to Antarctica, and Albatross is credited for bringing good winds. That is until the mariner decides to shoot it. This leads to strong feelings of anger from the crew towards the mariner. As down dropped the breeze, the sails dropped down, 'twas sad as sad could be. Furthermore, nature's fury arrives in the form of a drought. Coleridge focuses on the strong feelings of rage as the mariner receives evil looks from old and young. By hanging the albatross from the mariner's neck like a cross, the sailors create a constant reminder of the blame that the mariner receives for the crew's plight. Coleridge furthers his display of an overflow of powerful feelings when, after seeing a ship holding death and life and death, all of the sailors except for the mariner drop dead. With a soul in agony as he is alone on the wide sea, the mariner is able to find true beauty in nature's slimy things. It is this realization from the mariner's isolation from human life that provokes a spontaneous spring of love to gush from his heart and leads him to bless them, ultimately breaking his curse. When the mariner finally reaches the calmness and peace of land, he is compelled to tell his story because of his strong sense of woeful agony. Thus, this allows readers to understand the effects of the tale on the wedding guest. The guest's feelings transform from those of impatience to those of fascination and fear for the mariner. Ultimately, the wedding guest becomes forlorn, a sadder and wiser man, bringing the mariner a step closer to tranquility from his suffering. Coleridge's poem is able to echo Wordsworth's quote as the mariner's powerful emotions allow him to share his tale as well as find a slice of peace.